So after seeing a load of rave reviews about the M1 Mac Mini, I thought it was time to upgrade from my 2013 iMac setup. As you can see here, it's quite a nice slick setup. It's got a Stream Deck accompanying it along with a microphone. But now it was time to upgrade. So over the years I've definitely become quite accustomed to the iMac and everything that it brings with it, and I very quickly realised that as I was traversing over to the Mac Mini, there's going to be a few other things I needed to add to it to give me the functionality I wanted. The first of which is this Hagibis hub or dock. It sits quite nicely either on top or on bottom of your iMac, simply plugs in through a USB-C at the back, but it gives you a load more functionality. So in the base of the unit you can add your own SSD to radically improve the memory of a computer, and at the front there it's got a number of ports, so USB-A ports, micro SD, and on the base there you can insert your SSD drive. So I did my homework on this one, and even with the price of the hub factored in, it still works out considerably cheaper to buy a separate SSD and the hub rather than spec your Mac up when you're purchasing it from Apple. You can still save yourself a couple of £100 and also gives you the ability to change your SSD as and when you want to increase the size or introduce fresh memory to it. Just literally sits in the base of the hub here, undo the back cover and clip it in, and you're good to go. The next piece of kit that I needed to add was a webcam. Obviously the iMac has it built in and the Mac Minis don't, so I simply went for another Razer Kiyo. I won't go into that now, but if you want to, have a click at the review up the top there. I also decided to change my keyboard to the wireless Magic keyboard. It just meant that I should be able to sell my iMac and keyboard all in one and still give me obviously the use of the new Mac Mini. The keyboard itself is it does what it says on the tin really. It's a wireless keyboard. You do get a charging cable included with it. It's just a smidge smaller than a wired keyboard, which doesn't really change a lot, but it's just a little bit smaller, as you can see there. The other thing to note is the wired keyboard has two USB ports on the bottom of it, and the wireless one doesn't. Other than that, it's pretty much same as. Then final accessory I needed to plug the Mac Mini into is a new screen. Now I won't lie, I've kind of gone big on this one really. Went for the Samsung Odyssey G9 QLED super ultra wide screen. Real monster, but what's the point in having a nice setup if you haven't got a nice screen to put it onto? So cracking on with the unboxing, take the lid out. There's a few ancillaries here, so that's just a back plate that goes onto the back of the screen once you've got the wires connected. Clips in with some magnets. You've got a few leads, so you've got more than I was expecting, to be honest. You've got display ports, you've got an HDMI, your power lead obviously, and then you've got the stand itself. So the stand's well packed, it's pretty robust, feels pretty solid. I was quite surprised, it's actually got a bit of a hydraulic arm that allows up and down movement that we'll see a little bit later on. And then beneath the polystyrene itself you've actually got the bad boy itself, the G9, tucked in there. So the stand's super easy to put together, two holes in the base unit and then two screws in the top of the arm that are already in. It's literally as simple as putting them together and screwing them up. So excuse the flash of the pants as I get the G9 out, a little bit of manhandling going on there. Connecting it up's quite simple. You literally clip it onto the stand itself. It sits there quite nicely, and then there's just four small screws to do up to really secure it. So if you remember, I said earlier there was a little bit of movement in the stand. You can see here the weight is counterbalanced within the mechanism of the arm, and it moves up and down really quite smoothly and stays in place. And there you have it. There's the 49-inch super ultra wide Samsung Odyssey G9 set up and ready to go. All that's really left to do now is start clearing away, making some space for the bad boy to sit up on the desk. So now it's on the desk, just to give you a bit of an idea of the articulation that's available from the stand. Obviously it's got a tilt back and forth function as well as raise and lower. I think quite evidently the stand's quite big, and this is where you start to see the size of the screens and probably the impracticality of it, certainly on the desk that I've got here, and just how much space is taken up by the stand, and the sheer weight it needs to distribute means that the legs need to be quite long. Now clearly you can see on the table here, which is actually a 50 centimetre wide table, it's probably just not going to work. So we need to consider some different options here. If you've got a bigger table, I think it's going to be fine. The curvature of the screen is such that it actually doesn't feel too bad, but on a 50 centimetre wide table it's just not going to work. And just to give you an idea of the keyboard there, doesn't leave you a lot of real estate to get your seating position right or to feel comfortable whilst using the computer. So clearly I'm going to need to wall mount it, and I did kind of want to do this anyway, so it's quite nice to be able to crack on and get it done already. What you'll see here now at the moment is me just measuring, and there's about 15 centimetres there that I will save immediately by wall mounting it rather than having it on the stand. So to mount it to the wall you're going to need a few things. Firstly, a wall bracket, and secondly you're going to need this adapter bracket that comes with the screen. 5 screws there screw onto the back of the monitor, and then that will attach to the wall bracket itself. Wall brackets are a whole blooming sub-market in themselves really. There's hundreds or thousands of them that you're going to need. The G9's quite a heavy monitor, so it limited me to a few choices. I opted for this relatively simple one from Lindy, ludicrously cheap, in the region of sort of £8 or £9 including delivery, so really good value, still offers a bit of a movement, and it is rated to over 15 kilograms, which is obviously what the monitor weighs. Probably one of the more heavier monitors you're going to come across, so make sure you get a decent bracket that's up to it. The next challenge for me is how was I going to fix it to the wall. I live in a relatively new house that has plasterboard walls throughout, so I made sure I got the right things, which are these grip it fixings. I've seen them used before by professionals, and actually they mounted my TV downstairs with which is a 75-inch TV, and it held it to the plasterboard really firmly, so I had a degree of confidence in them, and they're good. So you literally drill a hole into the wall, you push the little grip it in, and then the wings splay out on the back to really help support the weight. Now, I probably don't need to use 4, but I'm going to, just for that extra degree of confidence to really hold the monitor in place and give me that assurance that it's not going to fall off when I'm not looking. So let the destruction begin. 4 holes are drilled in, grippets fit snugly in place there, just give me a little tap just to make sure they're deeply seated as possible. Then once they're all in and just tapped into place, just give them a little push through so that the wings are able to splay out at the back. Then it's as simple as offering the bracket up with the 4 screw holes screwing in. Make sure you get the bracket the right way around so it moves left to right rather than up and down, otherwise you're going to have a very soggy monitor. And then just as you get towards the end, just chuck a spirit level on it, just make sure that the bracket is as level as you can get it or as you want it. And just to help you visualise, obviously the monitor would be attached to this bracket in the future, but you literally offer it up to the holes, screw it in, and that will be the monitor mounted, hopefully. So here's a look at the underside of the monitor where all the cable connections go. And obviously you're not going to go to the trouble of mounting it onto the wall and then have a load of cables dangling down. So we now need to think about how we're going to hide those cables from view. So this is where having a nice new build house with plasterboard walls really comes into its own. All we're going to do is look to make 2 holes in the wall, thread the cables behind them so they're out of sight and nicely tucked away. So just do your measuring up, make sure you check for batons, electrical cables, water pipes or anything that may be behind the wall. Just use the back box of a plug socket there to get the right size of aperture, and then we'll begin to cutting. Just interesting of note, I should really have listened to my own advice and done a proper check for batons, as the second lower box there is actually in the wrong position, which I'm going to find out to my own expense later on. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. First is with a Stanley knife as I'm showing you here, and then the second hole that I'll cut will also be with a proper tool that's probably better for the job if I'm honest. Take your time with this one, and you'll see already the plasterboard's starting to splinter a little bit, so there may be a bit of touch-up work required at the end. And you just keep repeating this, putting more and more pressure onto the Stanley knife as you go, until ultimately you're through to the other side and you're able to pop the chunk out. And then any fine adjustments you need to do can simply be done by shaving it with the Stanley knife, just to take any fine bits off for last minute adjustments to make it nice and snug. And then, as promised, here's the other way, and probably better way of doing it, using a proper plasterboard saw. Just work its way through. Once you're through, nice and easy cut. Probably a lot easier, and dare I say, even a little bit safer as well. So you'll see here I've recognised the error of my ways, and actually the two holes are now in line so that I don't run into any batons. Change the metal back box to the plasterboard fixing one, simply because I have some wings that go out that really secure them in. My top tip of the day is to test the holes to make sure they're big enough to take all of your cables through. As we've just identified here, they weren't, and we're going to need to modify the back boxes a little bit. I'm not putting too many cables through. I'm literally putting the power cable for the monitor, 2 HDMIs, and then also the cable for the webcam. So we're just going to cut a little bit out the back boxes here, just to give it a bit more room and a bit more breathing space for the cables to fit through. The other thing that's important for me is for this to look really clean and really slick. So I've added a few more bits and pieces onto the cable array, and it's basically a blanking port and some brushes so that the holes in the wall look really quite nicely done. There isn't any drafts coming through it. What that does do is it takes a bit of planning to make sure you get all the cables and all the assorted paraphernalia in the right way so that it all fits together at the end. It is worth taking a bit of time to make sure you've got that right in your head. Otherwise, you'll end up taking a few detours and a few second takes, shall we say. So because it's a relatively short distance that I'm passing it through the wall, I'm able almost just to thread it through by hand. If I wasn't able to, I'd need to get a set of rods that are able to go behind the two holes and pass some distance. But thankfully on this occasion I can just kind of handball it through. And there we have it. 3 of the 4 cables are through the wall. The last one is the webcam lead, which needs to go from the top down. So again, it's worth taking my time here just to make sure I get all the right things in the right order. Make sure the brush plates are on, the cover plates on, and that it threads through so that it all conceals nicely at the end. Again, worth taking your time here. Make sure you do it right rather than having to take it out and go through. And again, total disclosure here, I'm sure many of you will have seen the bit of botched plasterwork there on the left hand side. That's where my first hole was going to go. Thankfully, before I got all the way through, I realised the errors of my way and have polyfilled it up with no real damage. Again, just need to stress, take your time in the planning of this, no need to rush it through, and then you don't end up with a wall like I've got. And there we have it, the cables are pretty much in, and it's just now really tidying up. That's all that's left to do. And I'm sure people will be thinking this is a lot of effort to go to just to hide the cables for probably 8 or 10 inches worth. Yeah, I don't disagree. It's just I like the nice clean setup look, and for me this was worth the effort. Obviously, if the distance is a lot greater, the effort's going to be just the same, but for a much better reward. So with just a little bit of sanding and a little bit of touching up left to do, it was finally time to get on and mount the monitor onto the wall. First things first, we had to put the bracket onto the back of the monitor, simply offer it up and screw the 5 screws in, and then off we go to mounting it onto the wall bracket. Not gonna lie, for simply offering it up and screwing 4 screws in, this was incredibly finicky piece of work. Really wouldn't recommend you do it by yourself. As you'll see here, I've needed to draft in a bit of reinforcements just to hold the weight of the screen and to help manoeuvre it. But yeah, that's pretty much the installation done. So the last piece of the puzzle was actually for the Mac Mini to be delivered, and it came a few days after I'd done all of the work. It's quite exciting to finally get my hands on it, undo it, and get it all set up. So I went for the 16GB of RAM simply because you can't upgrade it after you've purchased it. So I thought I'd go the whole hog now. Didn't particularly go to town on the internal memory because we've got the Hagibis hub with the 2TB of memory in it. Didn't feel it was really needed to. Typical Mac packaging, really nicely done. When you open it up, all that really is in the box is the Mac Mini itself, the power lead, and that's about it. A bit of gumph and some stickers that we're not going to ever look at again. So as we're looking at what's in the Mac Mini box, I'll just talk you through the migration that I did from the iMac 2013 onto the Mac Mini. Really smooth process, used the migration assistant. It took everything, absolutely everything across that I ever could have dreamt of. It did take in the region of sort of 4 or 5 hours to do build a bit of time in, but a really slick and smooth process. And I'm editing this video in probably about a month now after having the Mac Mini. Have to say I'm really happy with it. It's really quick, really a lot quicker than the iMac was. Admittedly, it's an old iMac now. And here's the final setup. This is what it looks like. You can't really see any cables. Looks quite sleek, quite slick. The screen itself is brilliant, and I was that happy with it. It was time to just start doing the peel porn, really. So overall, I'm really quite happy with the whole setup. Really quite nice. Glad with how it looks. Glad with how it performs. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe.